Welcome once again to Everyday Holiness, a Faith Indie podcast brought to you by the Notre Dame Alumni Association. This is again your host, Dan Allen, Associate Director of Spirituality and Service, and I'm glad to have you with us today. I'm pleased to be joined by my guest, Professor Meghan Sullivan. Professor Sullivan is the Wilsey Family College Professor of Philosophy, and she's also the Director of the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good. So, Professor Sullivan, welcome to the podcast.
It's so great to be with you.
I'm really excited to not only get into your story, but all the different things that you've been involved in while you've been here at Notre Dame. But we'll start at the beginning. What are some details and substantial moments of your early life?
So I did not go to Notre Dame. My dad, I've been working here for 15 years, and my dad, I think, tells people now that I graduated from Notre Dame, but I did not. In fact, I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina. And when I was little, I'm the oldest of three, so I've got two brothers. My parents had kids every 7.5 years, which is exactly the wrong way to do it.
Spaced out.
They had a very, very long period of caring for small children, but grew up in just an absolutely wonderful family, not Catholic. My parents were kind of working class. My dad worked at this company called Replacements Limited, so you break a plate and you want a replacement, this company in Greensboro, North Carolina is where you get the hookup. And so my dad worked there for a while. My mom was a receptionist in a dental office, and I was the firstborn, the real go-getter, super achiever, and went to our big public high school in Greensboro, the Grimsley Senior High School, home of the Fightin' Whirlies, and then surprised my high school teachers by going out of state for college, and I went to the University of Virginia, where I matriculated and I studied philosophy and government. And then after UVA, I went to Oxford on a Rhodes Scholarship, and I was at Oxford for a couple of years, and then moved to New Jersey, the place that's most different than Oxford on planet Earth, and finished my PhD at Rutgers. And I had the good fortune of getting hired at Notre Dame right out of Rutgers. So I moved to South Bend, Indiana, and I haven't looked back.
Good. Yeah, it has a way of sometimes drawing you in and staying, speaking from my own experience. So you mentioned that you didn't grow up Catholic. What was your faith experience, and how did you kind of make sense of that over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting. We are a tight-knit family, but just not particularly a religious family or particularly like a philosophy or big ideas family. We didn't debate Richard Dawkins at the dinner table. We mostly talked about school clubs and friend gossip and family gossip, like that kind of register. So I wouldn't say grew up atheist, just kind of grew up without religion being an important part of my life. And then I went away to Virginia in 2001, and I actually had a very profound faith experience my second year of college that drew me into the Catholic Church. So I went away to college, and I was super confident at the beginning of college that I knew how the rest of my life would unfold. I was sure. My teacher in 10th grade, Mrs. Kidd, if she's listening to this, Mrs. Kidd told me in 10th grade that I was pretty good at school and especially good at English, so I should be a lawyer. And I remember just to filed that away, and I was like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go to law school and live in New York City and make a ton of money and just have a certain kind of vision of what a great future is. And like so many 18-year-olds, I moved away from home, started at college, and realized that many of my plans, it's actually just a lot harder to be an adult than what I had believed when I was in high school. And I spent a lot of my first year of college just asking myself, feeling this kind of urge to ask myself, is this everything that's worth hoping for?
Yeah.
When I was in my second week of college is when the September 11th attacks happened.
Right.
And there was a lot that was shocking about that event. I think every generation has its watershed. For us, it was 9/11. For my students now, it's COVID.
Right. Pearl Harbor for grandparents.
100%.
Yeah.
So this was a defining event, external world event that happened right when I got to college. And I remember spending a lot of that first year thinking, my gosh, all of those people went to work in the World Trade Center, and they all had they all had the kind of job that I would give my left arm for right now. And then their lives are kind of over in a flash. And this is the kind of world that we live in, where even if you do everything right, you're the best student, you go to Yale Law School, you could do everything right, and still there's ultimately no guarantee that your own energy is going to protect you forever. So I thought about that quite a bit. And there was a Dominican church, St. Thomas Aquinas Parish, that was right near the dorm that I lived in, and I'd give it the side eye. I'd walk by it on my way, like from class, and I'd be like, "What are they doing in there? What's up with those people?" And I remember feeling like an intense kind of curiosity. I remember checking lots of books out of the library about like Judaism as a way of life, and just trying to understand people of faith, because I had not really spent a lot of time with them before. The first anniversary of September 11th. I had been really mulling over a lot of these questions and decided I was going to pull the trigger, and I was going to go to service at that church that was right near. I was still in the same dorms because I was a RA.
Okay.
And so I looked up on Google the Mass times and saw they had a 5 o'clock Wednesday Mass, and had it in my head. I was like, I bet the priest is going to deliver a big speech about September 11th and like the meaning of life. And this is such a huge anniversary. These religious people are going to really commemorate it and mark it. And like, I want to witness that. So dressed up and walked in. And of course, Dan, you go to a weekday Mass on a Wednesday. It's 4 old ladies. It's just like, Dominican priests. It's a bunch of the readings that they bury in the middle of the lectionary, and I sat there in the sanctuary and could not really understand what was happening. I had the wherewithal not to eat anything, which was good, but had just this very profound experience of, this is my home, like this is where I'm supposed to be, and these women that I'm praying with, they're picking up on the frequency that I'm trying to tune into, and I'm not there yet. Kind of when you move the radio dial and you can kind of tell the rock station is around here, but you just can't quite get it. Like, I had that feeling, and just this very strong feeling of like, you belong here. This is what you're searching for. So started going back to on Wednesdays at the scene of the crime, and would kind of sneak away in the afternoons to go to that Mass. And you're 19 years old and you show up a couple of weeks in a row to weekday Mass. The Dominicans, their Dominican sense is like, goes berserk.
Stick out a little bit.
So they went and snatched me like the third, fourth time I did it, and were chatting to me and what's going on, and I kind of explained it to them. Oh, if you like Wednesdays, you'll love Sundays. Right. You should start coming on Sundays, and we've got this RCIA class. You could take a class, and you could learn about this. And I'm a super nerd, so I was like, oh, sign me up for this class. Okay. And so that sort of set me on the path. In my Easter of my third year of college, the Easter Vigil, I was received into the church. Yeah. So, and haven't looked back. That was 22 years ago, and it's just been home ever since.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think it's very encouraging to people. Sometimes people grow up cradle Catholic, so to speak, and kind of have maybe an easier time. But I think there's a lot of, in this changing world, people who might come to the faith from different avenues. What were your family or friends' reactions to this sort of stirring in your heart and then seeing you actually go through with it?
I'll tell you what, I was my sophomore year of college and the first half of my junior year, I was pretty secretive about it because I didn't feel like I had good answers to people's questions. Sure. By that point, I was becoming a really hardcore philosophy major. If any of your listeners have hung out with philosophy, undergraduates especially, like everything's a debate. You're always expected to like just have like the winning answer. And one strong feeling I had as a college student at this time was, I know that this is the right thing to do, but if you ask me a bunch of questions about the faith, I'm not going to sound smart. Mm-hmm. Like I'm not. I just don't feel like I could win. And I was also protective. And I don't want to like same way somebody that's in like an early relationship just be like, I don't want to deal with the scrutiny. I want to just figure this out. Sure. That was kind of my feeling at that point. But then when we got to Lent and Easter of third year, it's very public. Joining the Catholic Church, you start making these public declarations.
Go up front.
Yeah.
Everybody sees you. Yeah.
So I remember I called my parents, and this was also back in the Stone Ages where nobody had cell phones.
Sure.
Like you called them on the phone like once a week. I called my parents and dropped 2 bombs on them in like March of that year. One was that I had no intention of going to law school and I was going to become a philosophy professor when I grew up, which that was a left field announcement. And second, that I was going to be, received into the Catholic Church in this 4-hour candlelight vigil. And then they're welcome to come. It's in the middle of the night in Charlottesville. And they did actually. They drove up, but then only at the end of the day, they were supportive, but a little weird about it.
Sure.
And so at the end of the day, only one of my parents actually came to the vigil.
Yeah.
But they were good. I think they were. One of the things I absolutely love about my parents is they've not really understood my academic journey, or my faith journey, but they've always realized I've been so happy and fulfilled, and they're the type of parents that really don't have really rigid expectations for any of their kids. Me and my 3 brothers have taken such different paths in life.
Yeah.
But they're just like, we're just happy you're happy. You've found something that gives you this kind of deep, deep feeling of joy as a parent. That's all we could hope for.
Sure.
So they were great about it. I really did not talk with my philosophy colleagues about my faith until I was like near the end of grad school. Because philosophy, Dan, is a very judgmental discipline.
Right.
Like some jobs, it would be inappropriate to judge you harshly based on your beliefs.
Yeah.
In philosophy, that's all you have is your
all day,
beliefs and
yeah.
ideas. So if you're not able to defend yourself, people can be pretty harsh. And so most of grad school, I was like, I'm not ready for this. And then near the end of graduate school, I had a really fantastic mentor who's an evangelical Christian who, really encouraged me to have a bit of courage. And then I came to Notre Dame, where Notre Dame is so unique, certainly among we have one of the top-ranked philosophy departments in the world. And we're utterly unique in probably being the only top-ranked philosophy department where not only is it totally fine to just let your Jesus flag fly, but in fact, actively encouraged. And Notre Dame is just such an encouraging environment for this that as soon as I got here, I really let her rip and started doing a lot of philosophy about my faith.
Well, and there's a lot in the intellectual tradition of the Catholic Church where there's so much interplay with philosophy. I mean, you're looking at Aristotle or Socrates or Plato, but then you talk about Aquinas or Augustine or any of the number of sort of philosophical thinkers in the Catholic Church. As you encountered them in your own studies and reading, was that a bolster to your faith?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things I tell my students is you should read and be in conversation with these great thinkers, but you're also allowed to bring your own imagination and concerns to the conversation. It's no great intellectual accomplishment to have just memorized passages of the Summa. I mean, that is a moderate intellectual accomplishment. Memorization is hard. But even better and even more honoring St. Thomas, to debate with him, because he was always ready to go.
Yeah.
And one of the really liberating moments for me in grad school, especially near the end when I was starting to get a lot more excited about philosophically exploring my faith, is I started buying. Robert Alter is this Jewish translator, and he's got all these amazing translations of the Old Testament. And he sells them as paperbacks. They just feel like real books that you can mark up and dog ear and chew on. And I'd always thought about reading the Bible as paper thin pages, and it's
Tiny
gold,
font.
and you really have to be very precious about it. You're definitely not going to read it while you're eating a taco. And I got the Robert Alter Old Testament books, and it'd be totally eating a taco and underlining it and be like, I can't believe David said this, blah, blah, blah. And for the first time felt like I could be like in the debate with a key holy text.
Sure.
And that has absolutely given so much life to my work as a philosopher in the last 20 years. This feeling you can take these books, and the real accomplishment is to know what these thinkers said and then to be willing to bring your questions to them and realize that this is a living tradition and you can fight with it. And some parts of it at different phases of your life are going to make more sense to you than at other phases. And then that's the fun of philosophy and the intellectual life of faith.
Yeah.
So that's all to say, like, one of the best reasons to be Catholic is you just have this incredible smorgasbord of materials that you could possibly engage with, far too much that you could accomplish in a lifetime.
Yeah.
And so there's so many different ways to make the intellectual life of your faith your own.
So this decision to pursue further studies and going to Oxford and all these things, coming back to Rutgers, what was behind those decisions, and were you confident that a life as an academic was the end game then?
I am glad that when I was young, I was kind of stupid. And I'm not gonna lie. Or like I was hopelessly naive. I don't know if you remember this cartoon from the 80s, Mr. Magoo. Do you remember the Mr. Magoo was just, he'd walk through all these dangerous situations, but he had such bad vision and he was so nearsighted that he just had no clue how much danger and risk was involved. Right. I feel like I just kind of Mr. Magoo'd my way through the first decade of my career, because if your listeners are sensible, they know there are very few jobs as a college professor.
Right.
In our department at Notre Dame, we'll get 400 applications for one open professorship from people with PhDs who are eminently qualified. Sure. There's just, it's really, really a challenging profession to go into. And it requires minimum 6 to 8 years of really difficult study and doing PhDs and postdocs. And despite all of your efforts, you still might not find your way, or you might end up in a community college in a state that's really far away from your family, and just a life that is very different than what you might have imagined. And sensible people, before they go to graduate school, sort of weigh these costs and benefits, and then their parents talk to them, maybe you should also apply to law school. When I decided, which was my summer between my sophomore and junior year of college, decided I wanted to be a philosopher when I grew up, I really just turned all the evidence down to zero. Like, I just stopped paying attention to any countervailing evidence that this was the right thing to do, and just put all my eggs in the philosophy basket. And then just got tremendously lucky, or Providence or something that managed to win that scholarship to a really good graduate program. It's very, very hard to get into graduate school right now for these disciplines. And then got the call from Notre Dame. Notre Dame wasn't even searching for a job. They weren't even trying to hire an assistant professor the year that I got hired. And it really was the university. I'd met folks at conferences and became aware a little bit of what I was working on, and sought me out. Yeah. And really just tremendous good fortune, which also means when I'm mentoring my grad students and undergrads here, I've got to put my reality check on, because I'm tempted to tell them of just apply to philosophy grad school and the rest of your life is going to be a brilliant dream. Right. And in fact, most of the time there's quite a bit of struggle in many moments where a scholar has a sort of dark night of the soul and wonders, am I maybe called to something different? So I have felt tremendous good fortune because I decided to go to grad school, and then the world enabled this dream to come true. And I've loved every minute of it. I have never, knock on wood, this summer is going to be the tough one, but I love teaching philosophy. I love my colleagues. I love my colleagues at the Institute. I love working at universities. I just adore universities, especially this one. So it's been pretty good so far. I mean, I have days where I get emails I prefer not to read.
Sure. Well, and I've noticed that theme sometimes in listening to different guests on the podcast, when you kind of look back on your life and see moments where wow, that was kind of risky, or maybe presumptuous, or that could have gone a lot of different ways, but for whatever reason, I do think it's part of finding our vocation and God's plan unfolding in our lives. Sometimes the things that are supposed to work out with our cooperation, but it doesn't diminish the fact that when you look back, you're like, wow, I can't believe that all took place.
Oh, for sure. And I was chatting with some colleagues yesterday about this. There are also these moments you look back on your life and you realize that was a moment of radical trust in God. Like, that's the only way to describe it. Same way a little kid has just radical trust. Your parent's going to catch you if you jump off of that tree.
Yeah.
That's one way of conceiving of those moments is you just say, it's not in my power to ensure that a certain thing happens, but I'm just going to trust that I'm going to get caught wherever I land.
Yeah. So when this opportunity comes to come to Notre Dame, was it a surprise to you? Was it exciting? And then as you maybe for the first time came to a place where, as you said, your faith was so welcome to be part of your everyday life here, can you describe that?
This is one of just the luckiest or most providential years in my life. I was finishing on my PhD at Rutgers, and I was getting ready to apply for jobs to be a professor. And I'm already planning my plan B if I can't do this. I was going to be a management consultant. That was my backup plan. I was going to try to get hired by a management consulting company. But I was in my office one day at the start of the new school year, and my grad student office was covered with these manila job applications, and I'd been trying to get together all my job materials. And this was also back in the days when you physically mailed your materials, which now seems totally crazy to me. But just remember, there were piles of these papers, and I'm stressing, trying to write this dissertation, trying to imagine what my future is going to look like. And I'd received an invitation, a very formal letter from the department at Notre Dame that was inviting me to give a colloquium talk. And basically what this is the final boss you have to fight for a job normally.
Sure.
Like the final round is you come to the campus and you deliver a research talk, and then the department attacks you, and tries to show all the problems with your work, and you meet with the dean and you meet with the students and stuff, and then they usually put 3 or 4 job candidates through that process, and then they hire one if you're really lucky.
Okay.
So it's called a flyout or colloquium. So they had sent me this invitation to come give a colloquium, and I showed it I called up my advisor, who I was very close to, and he used to work at Notre Dame, again, 30 years ago. I called him up. He was at the dentist. His wife picked up the phone, and I was explaining it to Tammy, and she was like, "Ooh, this sounds pretty serious. You better talk to Dean before you do anything. Don't reply to this email. Don't do anything."
Yeah.
So then, a half hour later, I get a phone call from my advisor, whose first name is Dean, and he's yelling into the phone, and he's like, "You did it today. You did it today." And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's all numbed up because he just got a root canal. And what Tammy interpreted him saying is like, you need to delay. You need to stall. And don't immediately say you're going to fly out to Notre Dame and do this final interview.
Yeah.
And he gets back on the phone an hour later when the Novocaine wears off, and he's like, "This is a huge opportunity. This is your make or break.
Yeah.
And you need to be extremely prepared when you go out there." And Dean knew that I had half of my dissertation written, and I had never given I'd never even given a talk before to an academic audience. So one of the things that I really appreciated Rutgers did for me is the day I got that note from Notre Dame, they're like, see if they'll meet you in October. See if you can get them to wait 8 weeks, because they were like, you need to come out for this talk.
Yeah.
And so we got it scheduled for Halloween, the job talk. And then for the next 8 weeks, my advisors at Rutgers were like, "You got a shot at your dream here. Don't waste your time on any of those other job applications.
Okay.
Give that minimum amount of time just in case. But all of your focus now needs to be on that interview at Notre Dame," because they knew Dean had worked here for a decade. He knew how much I would love it and knew me very well.
Yeah.
And so they just put me through my paces. And I remember Rutgers made me do all these practice job talks where they would grill me and they would pretend to be Notre Dame people. And so when I came onto campus in October, at the end of October, I was very nervous, but also my head was in the game.
Right. Yeah.
And it went incredibly well, and then got the offer at Thanksgiving. I remember that all got sorted out at Thanksgiving, and just the rest is history.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful moment to, again, look back in gratitude. Once you got here, I mean, giving a colloquium or a talk or kind of debating is different than finally getting in the classroom or doing the research or learning the department. So how did you manage some of those transitions?
I got a really good piece of advice the summer before I moved here. I got a lot of bad advice. I got a lot of advice from people that live in New Jersey that have never stepped foot in the Midwest. Like, who would tell me all kinds of just crazy things about the Midwest. The Midwest to people in New Jersey, no offense to your New Jersey listeners, but like Indiana to New Jersey, like saying you're moving to Indiana is like saying you're moving to Thailand, where people just say the craziest things to you. So I had a lot of like weird ideas in my head when I moved here. But one good idea, I'd spent some time with a friend that summer who had also the previous year started a new job at a new university. And he said the first day of school, like the first faculty orientation meetings or whatever, don't just be a passenger, but really collect up people's email addresses and organize social gatherings, like or be the person that organizes the happy hour and that just reaches out and proactively helps make connections. Because if you're in professional life, if you just move to a new place and expect friendship to happen to you, good luck. Like, people are busy. They've all got their lives going on. But if you build a kind of low-key environment where people can connect, people are going to come out of the woodwork to want to connect with you. And so on this guy's advice, I set up an email list the first week of school called Rookies, which was a group of people who had been hired in the last like 2 years at Notre Dame. Just anybody I met, I'd sign them up for this listserv. Right. And got some friends, made some friends early on in faculty orientation that agreed to help me with this. And we would just meet over at O'Rourke's for drinks like every Tuesday night. And that was how I built my friend group. And many of the rookies are still my like dearest friends in South Bend. Yeah. And after like I think the year 3 or year 4, we all then got busy and didn't have time for happy hour. And so we also weren't the rookies anymore.
Sure, yeah, the veterans now.
But that helped tremendously. I also think I'd been living in England and in Jersey before I came here. But I grew up in Greensboro. Like, a city of 200,000 people is my habitat. I think I immediately took to the fact that in South Bend, you spend time in other people's homes. There's a kind of pace of life which we all know and enjoy that is actually relatively easygoing. And so if you just embrace South Bend on its own terms, this is a pretty phenomenal place to live.
Yeah. It's a very good community, not only the Notre Dame community, but the wider South Bend community. As you started to gain your footing here and become that more seasoned professional and professor, what were some areas where you were teaching and what were some of your experiences there?
Well, another really like important formative year in my life was the year I went up for tenure. Yeah. Which is a huge, if you're a professor, this is when your university decides, are they going to keep you forever or are they going to fire you immediately? Right. And there are only two options. So it's like, it is a nerve-wracking year, especially if you like your job. Yeah. So the year I went up for tenure, I decided, and the decision, by the way, takes 9 months. It's a long, drawn-out process. It's not like it's just a given day. Yeah. So the year I was going through tenure review, I decided I wanted to be as far away as possible. So I went on sabbatical in Singapore. And kind of sat down there. There was no snow. It was amazing. But when I was away, and that was the first time I was away from campus, I started at least allowing myself to dream about what I wanted to work on when I got back, especially if I was a tenured professor. Sure. And the idea that I couldn't stop thinking about was I'd been teaching our big intro philosophy class and thought this class could be so much better. It could be so much more creative. It could be so much more directed towards the Catholic mission of the university. And I love teaching, and I really, if I have to pick a project when I'm permanent that I can just pour myself into, I want to completely redo the big intro class. Okay. And that's where the idea for the God and the Good Life course came from. Right. And so I got tenure, spoiler alert, and I came back. I came back to campus, and all the tenured professors got to have a meeting with John McGreevy, who was the dean of the College of Arts and Letters at the time. Right. And I remember thinking I was such a big shot, going with the big kids to the dean's office to talk about the department's goals. And so we had this meeting, and I had not gotten the memo. If you are a tenured professor and you're talking to the dean, and the dean asks you what your department needs, there is only one answer, Dan, and that's money.
Money.
If you give us money, we will convert it into whatever you want. Right. We need money to hire this person. We need money to hire that person. But that's the only correct answer of a tenured professor when you're in the dean's office. But of course, I didn't know that because I was kind of Mr. Magoo in it again through life as usual. So we were sitting around the table in the conference room, and it finally came around to me, and John is like, what do you think, Meghan, is the one thing that we should be really investing in the next year? And I was like, well, I think we should redo our intro class. And what if we did this God in the Good Life class? It was originally called God, Goodness, and the Goals of a Life, but we eventually, we quickly shortened it to God in the Good Life. And here's how it would work. It'd be kind of like Michael Sandel's class at Harvard, but it would all be about faith and reason and blah, blah, blah. And I gave my pitch, and my colleagues in the department are giving me this look of like, oh my gosh, who invited her? But
you can't undo the tenure decision at that point.
Exactly. It's like, oh, I can't believe this. But afterwards, and this is also just a very important moment in my professional journey and my work at Notre Dame. As I was leaving, John pulled me aside, and I'd never spoken directly to John before.
Yeah.
And he said, that was a good idea. That's a really good idea. That's really like putting on the hat of thinking about the institution. And he's like, you should do it. You let me know what you need. And if you tell us what would help you.
Yeah.
And just know that we would love it if you gave it a shot. And you don't need, I already have to teach classes. So it's just saying like, I'm going to try to teach a different kind of class.
Yeah.
But the dean's office was very supportive, and my colleagues came around and were very supportive.
Yeah.
But that was a real turning point. And now we've been doing God in the Good Life for a decade. And I wrote a book with one of my grad students at the time who subsequently went on to be a teaching professor at Notre Dame and is now doing a new venture. But me and him wrote a book that Penguin published about our vision for how we teach the good life at Notre Dame. And that, like, all of my speaking requests until about 2 years ago were all like, come talk to us about God and the good life. I'll be like, oh, I'm working on this really nerdy philosophy project. They're like, oh, great. No, we really want to hear about the God and the good life thing.
Yeah.
So that turned out to be wonderful for my career. Obviously, for my sense of vocation, just getting to be with 150 Notre Dame students twice a week, talking about these really big ideas and the care for their souls is what you imagine a philosophy professor does. And it's one of the areas where I feel like concretely I've given back to Notre Dame because you go into a Barnes & Noble now, and you can find a heck of a lot of books about what's wrong with a particular college campus or how like screwed up higher ed is. But you'll also find that bright yellow Good Life Method book, which is basically just a long love letter to Notre Dame and to Catholic education, and it talks about all the things that's going right and it's urgent and important about the kind of education that we provide. So I'm proud of that, and every time I'm in a bookstore, I'll go try to find it and turn it so it's face up so people will buy it. But think just like, this is Notre Dame literally putting something good into that space.
Yeah. Well, I think that's such a good point, because we can bemoan and lament the state of the world or things, but it's like, well, what am I doing about it? What are we doing about it? And I think that's part of the pursuit of vocation and the good life. So can you say, what are you trying to instill in our students as you teach them about the good life, and why do you think this has caught on and been something that's been admired even from outside the university?
So one of the big messages you can't miss as a freshman at Notre Dame and God in the Good Life is the ancient Greeks, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, they believed that philosophy was first and foremost about learning how to care for your soul. You've been given a soul. You've been given this very precious thing. And now you have to take care of it. And it's more like a puppy than a houseplant in the sense like it requires a lot of attention. And our students vaguely know that. Every human knows that at that point in their life. But they don't know how to do it or who's going to help them. And my undergraduate men watch all these YouTube videos about weightlifting and supplements. My undergraduate women have all kinds of ideas and fads and trends that they're trying to follow about what it means to become good, which is all they want, which is what they most want. But then it's wonderful to say, hey, did you realize these questions that you're asking, they're not just questions on YouTube. These are like the oldest questions that human beings ask. And you don't have to start from zero in how you're going to answer them. But actually, we can prescribe to you a little bit of Plato, a little bit of Marx, a little bit of Aquinas, and I, as your teacher, I'm going to show you how you show up in these big ideas. And this isn't me studies. It's not to say that my student and their particular preferences or ideas are the center of the universe. It's quite the opposite. It's like you are part of this much bigger story. And some part of you already knows this, but now your first semester at Notre Dame, I'm going to prove it to you.
Yeah.
One of the things we have all those students do in God and the Good Life is write this long essay we call their apology. But basically, Socrates wrote his apology, your defense for living. And what are your most foundational commitments? And what philosophy guides you? And what philosophy do you reject? And why? And one of the wonderful things about that project is, one, in the course of working with students on it, you get some real insight into what's going on in their lives and their minds. But also, now that we've been teaching the class for 10 years, I'll have I've been invited to 3 GGL weddings.
Okay.
We've had 1 GGL baby so far. But these older alums will come back and talk to me and will laugh about what they thought was the kind of essence of human existence when they were 18 and a half. And then some parts of their thinking will have changed. But actually, some things they'll look back and they'll reread that essay they wrote freshman year and think, oh, you know what? This is actually who I am. This is fundamental to me. And I have proof because I documented it.
Yeah.
And so that also gives me a lot of joy that we get to be a part of the students' lives and not just testing their knowledge of philosophy facts.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest benefits of teaching over a number of years is you get to see some of the fruits of that in playing out in people's lives and maybe sometimes things that you didn't even realize, like it was a throwaway line that you said, but they came back and said, that really meant a lot to me, or that really made a difference for me. And it's just it's a nice aspect, I think, sort of a God wink in that. So you kind of mentioned like this has been for the last decade like a major theme, but you've continued to do other things as well. So what have been some of your other pursuits in teaching and research and otherwise?
The thing that I'm most excited about right now is we launched the new strategic framework for the university 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago. And one of the priorities that the board and the university community declared is going to be our major focus for the next decade is there are all of these emerging, very complicated ethical issues that the world needs a Catholic voice on.
Yeah.
But it's just hard work to figure out what that Catholic discernment on the issues are going to be. And so we launched the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good as part of the university's ethics initiative and the strategic framework to say, all right, let's get after it.
Yeah.
And in particular, think about how powerful artificial intelligence is just completely upending our society. It's changing how second graders learn how to read. It's changing whether or not the news articles that you read, whether or not they've been written by a human being who's checked the facts or a piece of software that's just hallucinating what you want to see. We saw that this summer, the Holy Father decided we have to name artificial intelligence as one of the most significant new challenges to human dignity that we've ever faced on planet Earth in human history. And so the Institute brings together really fantastic staff who work with churches, who work with schools, together with really top scholars, top theologians, economists, philosophers, to basically behave like an advanced think tank for the Catholic Church. It's not good, it's not evil, it's just complicated.
Yeah.
It's how we use it that's completely disrupting our world.
Yeah.
And how do we make sure that our church leaders and our scholars at Catholic institutions are thinking very seriously about what does Catholic social teaching look like with this in the world now? And so we've been working very hard for the last 2 years especially on building up the capacity of Notre Dame to do that work. And we got an extraordinary grant from the Lilly Endowment of $50.8 million this past December to invest in that work. And it came, talk about providence. That grant came 6 months almost exactly before Pope Leo issued Magnificat Humanitas. So we have the chance now to say we're not just hoping that the church is going to mount a response to this issue. But we're ready to rock. We've got incredible faculty and students and staff working on this project. We've got the resources to get opportunities into the hands of the Catholic school system and into the hands of church leaders to really stand up for human dignity as this technological transformation happens around us. And that, working on a project like that, it's one of these things as a philosopher, nobody in philosophy grad school ever tells you that you'll get to be involved in something that might have that much concrete impact on people's lives.
Yeah.
But also the people that you get to meet and collaborate with, and the Notre Dame network. Notre Dame's just phenomenal network of people who look to us to accompany them in this kind of thinking. It's been fantastic. And also it means we've rescheduled this podcast twice. It also means that it is just a mile a minute. Also, nothing in philosophy grad school prepares you for just like this kind of pace of work, which that has been an adjustment for me this summer.
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking the time to do it. As you read through Pope Leo's encyclical, were things popping out to you like just, oh yes, this is what we've been doing, or this is kind of a roadmap, or what was your interaction with it?
I mean, I think to use a word that my students use, it's a banger. It's like this one. It was hotly anticipated, and it delivered. I think, like everybody, when I read the first couple of passages of it, I found myself having to Google the Nehemiah and the walls of Jerusalem. I was like, I knew about the Tower of Babel, but this is a deep cut for people who've actually read the encyclical. It starts with this story from the Old Testament that I 100% read and rememred. Now, I had to Google it.
You spilled some taco on that one.
I spilled some taco on that one. But then when you get into it, it's a fantastic teaching. There are kind of three acts to the encyclical. The first beat, Pope Leo answers this burning question: who cares what a 2,000-year-old church thinks of this brand new technology? Like, who asked the Pope to weigh in on this? Which is a legitimate question. You think, like, the Catholic Church is an AI company.
Sure.
Why on earth should we think that these oldies over in Rome have anything relevant to offer this really cutting-edge debate? And what Pope Leo does really beautifully in the first third of the encyclical is say we have a ton of reason to engage in this debate because throughout history there have been moments, concrete moments, where the Catholic Church has been called upon to bring these eternal ideas about the nature of a human being and our destiny and what a good life means for us and what the common good looks like into debates where the rest of the world got confused. And this is part and parcel of our theology, and how God works in the world is through just ongoing discernment. And we have every reason to believe that once again on this issue, the church is going to play that important role. So he does a good job of establishing his bona fides. The second part of the encyclical is where he just offers this blistering critique of what he calls the technocratic paradigm. And this, he echoes Pope Francis and other popes in this regard. But basically, he says, let's take a beat before we talk about specific uses of AI and just ask about our fundamental view of the world. And he's like, one view of the world says human frailty and vulnerability is bad. It constantly has to be fixed and corrected by technology. It says that all of our problems can be solved by just having a smarter technological solution, stronger AI, better system. That's where humanity's promise lies. And Pope Leo says, you all have breathed this in. You just assume that this is true, and it influences how we teach classes at the University of Notre Dame. It influences every aspect of our economy. And he says, this is not the church's viewpoint. The church absolutely believes in alleviating suffering and improving the human condition. But we also think we are born frail and dependent. We are going to exit this life frail and dependent. A world that has folks with disabilities in it is a beautiful, incredible world that reflects some aspects of God's nature and image. And if you think that our hope and destiny lies in powerful AI, you are just dead wrong. And the contrast, which in the third part of the encyclical he really develops, is he says, if you're not going to pick the technocratic paradigm, what's your alternative? And he says that the alternative is to say that we are aiming to build a civilization of love. And that is our highest calling. And that is going to concretely alter decisions that we make about this technology. For one, right now we're rating how good, quote unquote, good AI is based on how much profit U.S. companies are gleaning from this. Pope Leo says, instead, what if we found a way to measure technological progress based on its capacity to help humans love other humans in the human family? Like, what would it mean to have a relational metric for technology rather than the financial metric? And the church can say stuff like this. Anthropic, OpenAI can't say, hey, my shareholder report this year, we're going on the love index. But Pope Leo can show, and he really does show in the document, that not only is that just a nice idea, but there are different habits and attitudes and stances we would take towards this technology if we really believed that was our goal, and that's worth trying for that. Like, it's never too late in the human story to say, we're going to turn back from the Tower of Babel and from our goofy, dumb ideas and instead focus on what is really valuable in our lives.
Yeah, well, and of course, human history and even sometimes our lives are filled with too many examples of this pursuit of a false good, and you get to what you thought was completion or the end of it, and you're left disappointed. You're left empty.
Absolutely.
And the church is trying to, I think, prevent us or warn us against things like that. And you would expect that conversation, I think, to be happening at a place like Notre Dame. I think those of us who have been Catholic, that the church is, whether it's the Industrial Revolution or nuclear war or whatever the kind of the crisis of the times would be, like the church has constantly tried to be conversant in it. But you mentioned conversations with tech companies. You might not expect tech companies to want to have Notre Dame be involved in their conversations, but it sounds like that has been the case. So can you describe that a bit and what those conversations have been like?
Yeah, so it surprised me as well, but in a wonderful way. Like, what a world where these really powerful companies are actually now taking pains to engage communities of faith, and in particular the Catholic community. There's 1.4 billion Catholics on planet Earth. When the Holy Father decides this is going to be an issue that the church starts speaking on, that means that the Catholic Church is an entity that these companies can now react to and think with. So we started our project, which we call the Delta Network, and Delta is an acronym that's meant to really quickly and concisely explain to folks who don't know a lot about Catholic theology what the sort of Christian view about the value of a human life is, because that's safeguarding human dignity is the core of all of our ethical work and technology. So Delta means dignity, like humans have dignity and it is inalienable. It has absolutely nothing to do with their role in the economy or how good you are at solving math problems quickly or all the things that AI are going to be good at. Your dignity never for a minute depended on. What does make a human life special and what must be preserved and enhanced now that we have technology that behaves like a human mind in some key respects? That's where the ELTA comes in. Embodiment, we're embodied and we live embodied lives and we live our lives embedded in communities. Love, transcendence, we have minds unlike AI that are capable of grasping truth and goodness and beauty, which are independent or just freely given to us to enjoy, but we have to train our minds to know how to commune with those ideas. We have to learn how to pray. We have to develop contemplative virtues in addition to efficiency virtues. And then the A is agency. We have consciences. We can make a choice. And there are some aspects of our life that we can never give over to technology. We couldn't even if we wanted to, any more than like Adam could give away his free will in the garden. So Delta is our way of kind of quickly introducing folks, especially non-theologians, to what the church is going to have to say about why we're safeguarding humanity now and what that ultimately boils down to. And one of the areas where we've been really active in the past year is plenty of folks in the church, plenty of folks who work in industry or work in tech they're ideas people, and many of them are deeply ethical. They really want to do the right thing, but they're just busy and they're under tremendous amounts of pressure, and they don't quite know how to like engage with the Catholic Church. So we say, hey, Notre Dame's going to accompany you. Like, we're going to give you really helpful briefs. We're going to attend your events and speak on these issues in your neck of the woods. We just hired a first full-time person out in San Francisco. We're about to hire a full-timer out in D.C. But like, we're going to come be in your mission fields.
Sure.
And we've got PhDs. We've got the educational bona fides to be able to hang in an issue that's pretty complex and requires a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we know who we're serving.
Well, that's such a gift, not only to the church and society, the tech companies, just to all of us. It strikes me that a lot of people listening to this podcast are not going to be necessarily leaders in the church or software engineers or titans, but a lot of people are just going to be the everyday consumers of these technologies. So for those of people who might have concerns about interacting with some of these technologies, but maintaining their own dignity and the dignity of others, is there anything you would say to people about some tactics to approach this?
It's a great question. And one of the projects that we've launched in the Institute this summer is a Substack that's basically written for, the rest of us.
Yeah.
we call our people the Delta Force. So basically just like all of us who are just trying to safeguard our humanity and the humanity of our children, while also not being total Luddites and realizing like some of what this technology does. I'm a super Claude user. Some of what this technology does is incredibly cool, and like let's see how we can harness it. A couple tips I have for just everyday users. One, don't ever forget what this is. It is a text prediction machine. That's what you're paying the subscription for. You're paying a subscription for a piece of software that predicts text that you want to see based on what you put into it.
Yeah.
So it's not magic. Never give it your bank account information. Like, it's not anything you wouldn't feel comfortable putting on the internet. Don't give it to this. So just know what it is and put it in its place. It's powerful. It can do great tasks for you, but it's still a piece of software that predicts text that you want to see. Two, we get a lot of questions from two camps. One is, am I going to lose my job, or how do I make sure that this technology doesn't replace me, or is my kid going to lose their job? And the second big set of questions is like, should I let my elementary schooler or middle schooler play with it? And on the first set of questions, one of the things that we urge is, no, if I could predict the future of the U.S. economy after a huge tech shift like this, I'd be a billionaire.
Right.
I'd be a billionaire, and I'd give every cent of it to Notre Dame. But we really cannot predict what's going to happen with the economy.
Sure.
There will be big shifts, but anybody who tells you, like, if you major in this in college, you're going to be safe. Or if you just develop this skill, you're going to be fine. They're selling you a bill of goods. Like, we're just in uncertain territory, which means that one of the most important things you can do with this technology is incorporate it as makes sense into your life, but also make sure you're just keeping your core virtues growing and burn, like your intellectual curiosity, your relationships, your sense of where you're being called by God to work, and then try not to have a ton of anxiety, because the changes are coming, but they're coming to all of us equally.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a silver bullet. Like, if my kid just majors in data science and English, then they're going to be good forever. It's like, they're not. We cannot guarantee any of that.
Yeah.
But we can guarantee that if you're really digging deep on discernment, and the church has plenty of guidelines to help you with discernment when you're feeling uneasy about your life and its direction, that could really come through for you now when everything is so uncertain.
Yeah.
As with children, we've been developing incredible relationships with the Catholic school system.
Yeah.
And, there's only so long you're ever able to keep a kid away from screens or from this technology right now. But it's probably developmentally important that we wait till high school to really let kids have accounts or access to an extremely powerful piece of technology that's very addictive. It's also very much even more important than trying to protect young people is preparing them. So making sure that at home and at school you are talking to your kid nonstop about what human dignity really consists in. And don't ever let them get the idea that they're basically just an AI in meat, or that other people's lives are valuable because of what they can or can't do versus who they are. And your kids are going to be well situated to navigate a very complex world with this technology in it if they have a very strong sense of who they are that comes from their families and their schools. If you don't do that work, though, and if you kind of naively assume, oh, there's this really cool app that promises it's going to teach my first grader how to read, and if they don't use the app, they're going to be left behind and they're going to get kicked out of high school and they'll never succeed. Like, if you buy into that technocratic false narrative, then there's a lot to be afraid of, because your kids are going to be in this pressure cooker, and they're going to, for every family that's got the kind of right disposition towards this technology, there's going to be 3 others that are caught up in the screwed up technocratic system. And explore, like, adults that are listening to this podcast, pick a reputable model, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, and ask it to help you come up with a recipe for dinner. Ask it to do a simple activity and just start your own discernment about how it works. And you probably are going to also find aspects of your life where this gives you power to do things that is good, gives you and
some
opens
time
up.
back. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that perspective. I mean, I think there is a lot of uncertainty, and people are trying to figure out the best way to navigate it, as you said, not only for themselves, but their family members, especially children, and working through that. So I really appreciate that. And this is a challenge of our time, and there have been challenges in previous times that people have gone through, but we still ultimately return to the eternal things and the long-lasting things, the transcendent things. So, and I think that's where I'd like to turn finally to holiness, because no matter when we are born or what the challenges are, we are all called to holiness in some way. So as you have made your way through your life and career and faith, who have been some of the models of holiness to you, of people or lives that you've looked up to say that's worth emulating?
I mentioned my advisor in grad school, and he, many philosophy professors kind of uptight, very, very status conscious, very, very worried. Is my book going to get published? Blah, blah, blah. We actually, in the field of philosophy, we have this rating scheme that's taken very seriously. It happens every other year, where every employed philosopher's name, everybody who works in the big department, is included on this big database, and your colleagues across the country rate you 1 to 5 basically on how smart you are.
Wow.
And then they go back and they issue a rating for your department. So this gives you a sense of how neuralgic my field is. I really did admire Dean because he was somebody who had been successful in his profession, but his faith came first, and he wore it easily. He wasn't super judgmental. He looks kind of like a rock star. He's got like long hair, and he likes to go to concerts, and he loves to talk about Jesus, and just sort of effortlessly lets his faith permeate every other thing that he's doing. Talk about everyday holiness, and does it in a way that's like, this is nothing to be afraid of. Like, this is a totally natural, joyful way of being. So he was the first academic role model that I'd seen, where I'd met some academic role models who were like hardcore into apologetics and practice their faith the same way they practice winning philosophy arguments. And that's one approach, and I would have found that, I think, really alienating. But then I saw Dean's approach, which is keep it with a light touch, but just let it be a part of every single moment of your day. Like, pray ceaselessly, but gently.
Yeah.
Obviously, my parents, not particularly religious people, but in their way, their kind of unfailing commitment and love for their children and willingness to sacrifice for their marriage. And they've served as a witness that I couldn't appreciate this when I was a teenager, and I appreciate it so much more now that I'm an adult, of just what it means to sort of relentlessly love. Yeah. And I think so much of holiness is not a matter of outward appearances. You were wearing a big medal around your neck or praying in the town square, but it's really all of these moments where people witness agapic love in your habits and practices and dispositions. Yeah. And so I now I look back on our family life when I was growing up and think, these guys had to deal with some real challenges, and this kind of love was always at the center of how they did it.
Yeah, it's such a gift that you as you said, sometimes you realize it more in hindsight as you look back on things. As it relates to your life now, you're teaching, you're doing research, you're at the forefront of these very important conversations related to AI and all the rest. How do you stay grounded in your own pursuit of holiness? What are some of the tactics that have worked for you in staying close to God through some of the busyness?
Also, another mentor to mine, and somebody who I've been trying to get a lot of advice from lately, is Father John. I don't know if you ever had Father John on the podcast.
Not yet, but
all right, you got to get Father John. Father John
Jenkins.
Pretty
busy.
He's busy being the president.
Right, yeah.
I very, very, very much admire Father John, and he's been involved with our institute through the Jenkins Center for Virtue Ethics, and also just been a mentor to me in my time at Notre Dame. But Father John has given me a lot of advice recently, because in the work that we're doing, it's high profile enough and high stakes enough that pretty much every moment of every day somebody is angry at me.
Yeah.
I cannot keep everyone happy.
Sure.
And somebody wants this thing done now, or they'd prefer that this other person had not been invited to that event. And just every single day I'm fielding hot ones. And that can be disconcerting as a leader, especially if you think, I really just want to care for all of you.
Yeah.
And I'm just not able to do it. And Father John is repeatedly given this advice, not just to us, but you've heard it in his preaching and leadership at Notre Dame, that you've got to prayerfully discern what you're being called to do and who you're serving. And you got to make sure you got your intentions right, because some of the times you don't pass that test.
Yeah.
Like, you're being kind of self-serving. You're being very proud. But once you get clear on that, what am I trying to do? And am I trying to do it for God? Am I trying to really do it to help this community? Then damn the torpedoes. And you have to also have this posture of humility, because, again, people are going to be angry at you, where you say, this is what we're trying to do, and I'm trying to serve, and it's also okay if at the end of the day you don't think I'm the star or I'm your best friend, because it was never about that to begin with. And so I think this kind of the posture of humility and service, it sounds great. You know, people plaster these on their leadership, Pinterest and stuff. In practice, it is so much harder than you think it's going to be. It is very, very hard. You got somebody yelling at you on the phone at 10 p.m. About a major project, to be able to say, all right, this doesn't feel good, but I know that I'm trying to do the right thing. And I trust that I'm taking enough time prayerfully to ask if I need to change course, and that as long as I'm doing that, then it doesn't matter. It's not about me, and let these be sacrifices that I make for something bigger that I'm called to serve. And so that kind of insight, I feel like the last 2 years, especially with this role, I knew that in theory before, but now I'm learning what it feels like to really believe that. And I have been very grateful to Father John and some of the other wonderful leaders at Notre Dame who really accompany and mentor those of us that are still in the trenches, have helped remind me of that when the going gets tough.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and just thank you for all that you're doing. You've just become an important person really here at the university, not only for what we've talked about with the God and the Good Life course and the impact that you're making on students, but I think it felt like a providential time to have you on the podcast because of what you're doing with the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good and these conversations that the world needs to be having. So I just appreciate your time during a busy summer to talk with me and to share this story with your audience, and just thanks and prayers for all that you have coming up.
Well, likewise, speaking for myself and for the Institute for Ethics and the Common Good, we love Faith ND. We get our scripture in our inbox every morning, and it's Aristotle tells us that the good life is not a matter of ideas, but habituation. It's like your daily habits. And so being able to have resources and touch points like this podcast and everything Faith ND does to give people just little moments each day where they can recenter and focus on what's ultimately good, that's such a gift to our community. So thank you for everything you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. We're very blessed to be a part of that. Well, that concludes this episode of Everyday Holiness. As always, we invite you to subscribe, to share the podcast with anybody that you might think really would enjoy it, as well as as Meghan described, to subscribe to our Faith ND Daily Gospel Reflection at faith.nd.edu/signup. There you'll receive that daily reflection at 4 a.m. so you can keep things first, as well as notification of future episodes of the podcast. Until next time, thanks for being with us, and God bless you all.